There's 108 known Upanishads. 20 are on Kundalini Yoga, 12 on spiritual knowledge. Nadis are mentioned in all 108, but chakras don't really get a look in. They're only really mentioned in the Yoga Upanishads, which are considered a rather minor, even obscure little part of that literature. So why are chakras ubiquitous? Why do basic white girls and the stretchy people bang on about them all the time? Maybe because we just love stealing spiritual stuff from other cultures, misunderstanding the shit out of it, then massively dumbing it down and selling it. What's really crazy about the chakras is that they are probably the most stupefyingly complex, secretive, esoteric topic to ever come out of Asia. So it's freaking hilarious watching yoga mums talk about them. In fact, if you ever hear some white hippie talking about how the chakras work, just go and slap the shit out of them. Like, this is the quantum mechanics of the spiritual world. So, unless you're Albert Einstein, then you can shut the hell up. Now, I don't know how they work, but I can tell you about their history. Let's go. Early Sanskrit texts contain dense meditative visualizations designed to activate and control the chakras, which then grant the practitioner superhuman abilities. The chakras were to be pierced by Shivalinga and Kundalini Sakti, dissolved and subjugated, and or visited as holy pilgrimage sites. Subsequent texts developed these meditations further to include goddesses, animals, deities, Sanskrit letters, seed syllables, and geometrical shapes. Different colors then became associated with various parts of the pictograms or mandalas. These embellishments progressed over 1,000 years through different countries and varying traditions, as if building on previous aggregate. So what we often mistake to be a homogeneous body of unbroken knowledge was actually a long evolutionary process. Scriptures about the chakras are relatively recent, dating back to about the 8th century. The Yoga Upanishads had established a 6-chakra system by the 1400s, but it was a 1577 Bengali text that was the keystone for the construction of the sevenfold Western model. That's right, the 7 rainbow-colored system that you've probably seen was invented by Westerners. We added this idea that they are emotional energy centers that are bad when blocked and good when open. We also added the idea that the chakras might have actual physical locations in the body. Whilst there are some amazing correlations to glandular systems and nerve clusters, that was actually a fanciful leap made by Indian and Western scholars in the early 1900s. Just over 100 years ago, the first interpretations and translations of Indian spiritual texts started making their way west. The most influential of these was penned by British Orientalist Sir John Woodroffe. It contained a translation of that 1577 Bengali text, which was called The Examination of the 6 Centers, plus a translation of a manuscript called The Fivefold Footstool, and then Sir John's commentary on Kundalini, amongst a few other things. The Serpent Power is deeply seminal and still in print. Woodroffe's translations played a huge role in legitimizing Indology to Western scholars. He led a double life, moonlighting as a spiritual initiate of occult yogic practices, although not much is known about this, as he had to keep it secret for fear of scrutiny. Some esoteric practices were considered repugnant by Orthodox Hindus and, of course, the British colonialists, so he published his work under a pseudonym. Judging from his nuanced understanding and personal experiences, it's safe to say that Woodroffe had real-world experience and functional knowledge of how to perform the chakra meditations. He began to notice that both Indian and Western scholars were starting to mangle the interpretations of the scriptures about chakras, because they were academics and not tantric practitioners like he was. In the introduction to the Serpent Power, Sir John takes them to task like a boss. Remember that this was written in 1918, so us whiteys have been fucking up the chakras for over 100 years now. Woodroffe gave plain warning not to oversimplify the chakras, but of course no one listened. Instead of people like him and native masters, it was in fact Western professors, Indian scholars, and various key figures within the Theosophical Society who helped the West mangle the information. Gray's Anatomy was on its 17th edition by this time, and it was a simple hop, skip and jump to overlay the chakras on top of Western anatomical science, and voila! An ancient esoteric Indian meditation system now becomes a plausible field of academic study. It was exciting to think that the chakras could be explained in ways that Western academics might recognize, but remember that the Upanishads never spoke of chakras having physical real estate in the body. They were always energetic areas. Now, we can't deny that some of the chakras do appear to overlap perfectly on major anatomical junctions, but that was a Western innovation. These shenanigans began around 1880, and the correlation with the endocrine system began around 1920. It's cool, but it's a bit arrogant, isn't it? I mean, did Western academics with zero occult experience really stumble onto something that adept masters, monks, ascetics, and gurus had just failed to see after practicing for thousands of years? Really, bro? Even if you do earnestly delve into the scriptures for the answers, it would require both scholarly and spiritual mastery to decipher the recondite twilight languages. About the Tantras, Sri Shyam Sundar Goswami has this to say. You see, understanding Tantras without a guru is like reading a map in an alien language without a key. You have to be initiated to decipher the codes. This was a clever way of ensuring that non-initiates don't get their hands on secret knowledge, even if they take it by force. But did us whiteys care about that? Of course not. Burgeoning interest in psychic phenomena amongst European societies was fanning the flames for these English translations. Marrying mechanized printing technology with a surging popularity in occultism lit fires in the Western psyche that steadily and brightly burns many a dollar to this day. The billion-dollar neo-spiritual industry loves that chakras line up perfectly with 7 of anything, the planets, the color spectrum, and the diatonic music scale. These kinds of shenanigans also opens the door to color and music therapy and even oils and perfumes being associated with parts of the body. Whilst it is seductive to line up numbers and locations that seem to fit nicely, the reality is actually not so neat. Ancient texts spoke only of vital points or places. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali named 4 areas, but no wheels. The first ever recorded mention of an energy center was a lotus in the heart, and it wasn't until the 8th century that the leap from 4 to 6 chakras was made. Medieval Buddhist, Chinese, and Indian canons only mentioned 4 energy areas, with the Tibetans noting 5. Later influential texts note 3 sub-chakras in the skull. Some teachers reckon there are 7 in the throat and head alone, and there's some that float above the head. Other 16th century systems had 10 chakras. The 21 minor chakras have been forgotten entirely, it seems, as was this one specific to the heart. Theosophy added a spleen chakra, kind of off the midline, and some systems put the total number of chakras in the human energy field at a whopping 49. This masterclass badass tops them all though, with 114. How chakras evolved from an Eastern system to a virtually indistinguishable Western one took over 100 years, and it would probably take me 100 years to explain that. But basically, this Russian mystic was fundamental in first bringing the concept westward. Meet Madame Blavatsky, one of the founders of the International Theosophical Society. Founded in New York in 1875 by 19 occultists, it eventually established its main headquarters in India. On the subject of chakras, Blavatsky had this to say. Obviously, chakras was the term that stuck. Now, by all accounts, Blavatsky really knew her shit and was aware of the recondite nature of occult knowledge, but she and a few others in the society claimed that they were in psychic contact with ascended masters who could decipher the secrets of the chakras. So, even though Blavatsky and her contemporaries felt that they had the legit knowledge on the chakras, once this concept got to the West, it went native and free range, and eventually got dumbed down into the rainbow-colored psychotherapy centers that you see everywhere now. How that happened essentially boils down to the publications of one guy in the Theosophical Society called Charles Leadbeater. He laid down a lot of what eventually became the Western model. The Chakras was published in 1927 and is still considered a classic hit by neo-yoga heads. But you can see here the kind of stuff that Woodruff was warning about had already crept in. Anyway, here's a brief rundown of some interesting and fun stuff regarding the 7 names that the world eventually settled on. It's interesting to note that some texts use the suffix adhara, which means support, others used sthana, which means place, and others used pitha, meaning seat or pilgrimage sites. And don't forget, loads of other texts just simply called them all lotuses. But these are the names that we ended up with. Muladhara, also called Gouda, which means rectal. Svadhisthana, which can mean private, secret, place where the breath arises, or her own place, her special place, referring to where Kundalini resides. It's also called Medhra, which means genital. Manipura. The less used name for this center, Manipuraka, means jeweled city. So this is definitely a legacy of the Kundalini yoga practice of doing mental pilgrimages in the body. Anahata means unstruck sound. Although this is not an audible sound, it eventually became associated with the seed syllable Om. Apparently, mastery over this center allows you to psychically enter and control the minds and bodies of others at will. Vishuddha means purifying. Ajna means command, indicating that mastery over this center results in you having command over your mental and emotional states. It's also said to be the point through which instructions from the guru are transmitted energetically into the practitioner. Sahasrara. Sahasrara. Thousandfold. I've been told there's no adequate translation for 1,000 in Sanskrit, and therefore it could just mean many, many-fold. This chakra was also referred to simply by its location, Murdhan, meaning head or cranial vault. Other people argue that it's not even a chakra at all. Most visual depictions almost always place the lotus downwards like a skull cap. So, as you can see, the concept of each chakra seems to have been hashed together over thousands of years from different traditions, practices, and cultures. Ours was hashed together about 100 years ago by interesting occultists and scholars and people interested in esotericism, and then, as usual, hijacked by hippies. This has been a quick skim of the surface of this topic, but suffice to say that the Western system is to the Eastern model what the Wiggles are to a symphony orchestra. Now, you'd think that a lot of legit masters would be pissed off about this rainbow hippie nonsense that's everywhere now, but actually that might be the opposite. Author, scientist, meditation master, and founder of the School of Esoteric Sciences, Bodo Balsis, has this to say. Remember that the rishis wrote intentionally garbled, cryptic instructions on how to activate the chakras, and no enlightened authority would ever disseminate the secret knowledge on tampering with energy system through books alone. So all this New Age rainbow stuff is just like kiddies playing around in a sandbox. And hey, that's cool. We can all sing the Wiggles together and have some harmless fun. We can wake up Jeff instead of our Kundalini. As always, God bless you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and share it if you did.